Hello, once again, salam. This is Brother Octavius. Today, I want to share with you a paper that I wrote. I would like your feedback. I ask that you give me any feedback on it. The title of it is called "My People Are Destroyed for Lack of Knowledge: The Dichotomy of the So-Called African American and the Ethiopian of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church." Okay, so I have constantly, and I mean over and over again and again, asked myself, why is the so-called African American not accepting of the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church? And why is the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church not too accepting of the so-called African American? I see and hear so many, so-called African American people that have so much disdain toward Christianity. And then there are others who are the exact opposite that say, I am a Christian. Now, in America, one of the main reasons for this disdain towards Christianity among those of African descent, though is from a understandable misunderstanding of the faith, it's the belief that Christianity is, or you know, a white man's religion. This is due in part to the belief, though very misguided, that the European had brought Christianity to Africa, and more importantly, that it is and was used during the time of slavery, and even today as a tool to keep the enslaved, so-called black people in line. So there are those who absolutely refuse the Christian faith based solely on this American history of Protestant Christianity. And on the other hand, you have those who have heard the same information, know the same history, American history that is, yet have accepted what was given to the diaspora, the version of Christianity that is so prevalent to date in America, the Western European version of the ancient Orthodox or Christian faith. At this point, I would like to state that I myself was a part of the former group. I could not believe nor had faith in a religion that I was told and even showed that was used to enslave my people. I could not believe in this blonde-haired, blue-eyed Jesus whose image resembled the image of the colonizer, the image of the oppressor. I could not believe in, nor did I want to go to heaven where this white man's or white man was God, as I had seen through history what these people had done in the name of their God to my ancestors. So why would things be any different in their heaven? Was a question that I had posed to myself time and time and again. So with this said, part of what I've written is to answer the question, why does the so-called African American disregard the EOTC? I ask this question because after very intense study of the Christian religion, one will find Ethiopia to be the first Christian nation, which disproves the belief that Christianity is a European religion or the white man's religion. The most common response that I have received to my question, because I've asked, different people of African descent, why aren't, so-called black people so accepting of the EOTC? The most prevalent answer was that I have never heard of it. At this point, when I asked that question, I became very puzzled on how is it that so many quote unquote black people have never heard of the oldest Christian nation being in and of Africa. Um, it really puzzled me. It struggled. I struggle with that. Like, how do you have all of these black ministers, preachers, priests, and whatever else, and no one has ever mentioned Ethiopia or the ancient EOTC to the people? This makes me begin to wonder if this is another one of those instances where black people in America disregard and view Africa and whatever comes out of Africa as ugly, as evil, or simply just less important than whatever comes out of and from Europe. Another response that I received once my question was asked is, I'm not comfortable with going outside of how I was taught. This along with, I do not care what anyone has to say. I would not compromise what I've been raised on. Most of these, again, were evangelical Protestants, most probably Baptists. They have been taught that if it's not in the King James Version of the Bible, then it is not of God, which is emphatically not true. To these responses, my mind went directly to the Stockholm Syndrome. These people, knowingly or unknowingly, have become to be sympathetic to and of their captor. What I mean is, instead of doing a true and thorough study of what they proclaim they believe in order to show themselves approved for the authentic Christian faith, they go no further than Protestantism. They go no further than their King James King James version of the Bible, and they are preachers who, in turn, majority of the time, do the exact same thing. This syndrome has become so unhealthy that they began to proclaim that the original teachings of the ancient church is devil worship, which is very disturbing. To me, with these type of things, it is very true what God has said in Hosea 4, chapter 4, verse 6. For my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Now, before you all get me wrong, remember earlier I mentioned that I myself was a part of one of the categories that I mentioned. You see, when I was younger, the very first religion that I accepted was the Yoruba tradition, commonly known as voodoo. I was told by so many people that I was going to hell. I didn't care too much about that because I didn't believe in their hell. I eventually left that belief system because it started to bring a wedge between me and family members. Like my grandmother, for instance, who was raising me, my sister, to a degree. It was just different people once they seen or heard, that I practiced that. It was a type of separation. They really want to be bothered with that, mostly because of how they were raised. To be honest, the Bible, at least the name of it, at this point in my life, was not something altogether that was foreign to me. As I can remember, my grandmother teaching my younger sister Psalms 23 when we were children, as well as the fact of my mother always saying something in the name of Jesus. However, my inner spirit would not allow me to accept the images that were being pushed at me of this Son of God, nor being so passive to the point of being cowardly. Those teachings of being so passive that you stand for nothing, you begin more so to be a coward. My inner spirit would not allow me to accept anything like that. By the age of 12, I had taken the Shahada of Sunni Islam. I had heard about Islam at this point of my life from my dad, who would always do the Muslim call to prayer, the Adhan in Arabic, which always left me mesmerized. So I eventually accepted Islam as my religion. I proclaimed to be Sunni for a few years, faithfully attending Jumu'ah, offering Salat, and observing Islamic holy days to the best of my abilities, as well as the pillars of the faith. I eventually fell away from Islam due to some older persons that used to ask me to bring marijuana to the masjid, which I did, as I assumed since they were born into Islam that they knew what was permissible and what was not. That they knew more about the faith than I did. After observing and participating in this, I came to the conclusion that these people were no different than the other hypocritical people in faiths that they had spoke about and that I had even seen with my own eyes. What I was reading in the Quran and what was being said to me wasn't adding up. So I went back to the streets, unfortunately. And at this particular time of my life, I did not believe in anything. I did not believe in God nor anything else. The only sure thing that I believed in was the promise and presence of death. As sure as you're born, you're gonna die. That's the only thing that I believed in. And at this time, me and my circle had a saying that nothing on earth is promised but death. So F it. So I was living with an outlook that allowed my actions to land me in the Virginia State prison system for 9 years. During this point in my life, I began studying, searching, after being incarcerated for nearly 3 years first. Because during the first, that first day to the 3 year mark, I was still into everything else that I was into when I was on the streets. But I began to proclaim to be Rastafarian or Rastafari, as I had spent time with some of the brothers on the street before my incarceration. I must also admit that the smoking of marijuana at that time influenced my thought process of this group tremendously. And not knowing the teachings of John Hoy or His Majesty Emperor Haile Selassie also strongly influenced my opinion of this group, because I didn't know exactly what I was supposed to be doing. As I began my journey in prison, I started to read the Bible. However, it didn't last very long, as I struggled with the authenticity of the book itself. I still went to Islamic services during this time, but I also studied with different, you know, quote unquote Christian denominations, from Jehovah's Witness, Seventh Day Adventists, Methodists. I didn't do a lot of Mormon stuff. I did read the Book of the Mormons, but I wasn't feeling that. I also studied with Presbyterians. Though during all of this study, I still proclaimed and identified with the Rastafari community. I also began to study Pan-African teachings, to assist in the transitioning into a love for myself and for my people. As I got deeper into my studies and even became a teacher of the Rastafari community, I started to notice that most of the teachings that were being promoted in the Rasta communities, uh, like the teachings of Leonard P. Howell, Archibald Dunkley, other people, were not the teachings of His Imperial Majesty. So at this point, I began on another journey of transition. I told myself that if I'm calling myself by the first name of John Hoy, and his title, which the title was Ras, meaning head. Teferi was his first name. So if I'm calling myself Ras Teferi, then I need to begin truly imitating him, His Imperial Majesty. So I started to read books that Janoi, His Majesty, was claimed to have read. I taught myself to read and write um, in Amharic, the Amharic language. That's the language of Ethiopia. Amhara means in Giz, free people. It literally means people free, but so it's the language of the free people. I also tried to observe all fasting times and seasons that Jean Hoy observed, to the best of my abilities, of course. I had transitioned from seeing Jean Hoy as the Almighty God to beginning to believe in the person of Yeshua HaMashiach, Jesus Christos, commonly called Jesus the Christ, as I did not believe in him up until this point. I came to the conclusion that by logic of believing in who I believed in, if that makes any sense. Through constant meditation, I asked myself, where did Jean Hoy get his teachings? This all led me to studying the EOTC. As head of the Rastafari community, at the prison facility which I was being housed at, I strove to bring the brothers to the Tawahiro faith. Tawahiro is about the nature of Christ, being one unified nature. So it's just unified. So I wanted to bring the brothers to a unified faith of Jean Hoy. I did this by sneaking to use the administration phones to call the churches. What I mean by that is I had a job that allowed me to be where the administrative people worked. So I had to clean their offices and things. So once they were gone, and I went up to clean at nighttime, I would sneak and use the phones to call the churches. Because I had a desire to know the truth. And when I say the churches, I'm speaking about the Ethiopian Orthodox churches. And I needed to be able to give the proper teachings of the EOTC to the brothers. There were multiple churches that I called, and even spoke with different people. However, there is one church that stuck out the most, and not in a good way. The church that I'm speaking of is located in D.C., off of Buchanan Street. I was told by clergy that I would be sent the Bible in Amharic, which contains the 81 books that's supposed to be in the Bible, and other study material, which I never received. I was also told that clergy would come and visit, as I was hoping to bring the rest of the Rastafari community to the Church of John Hoy. However, this was all to no avail, because no one ever came. I had written the church multiple times, sent tithes, even risked getting more time by calling, these churches on unauthorized phones, all for nothing. I wasn't authorized to use these phones. It was just not what I was supposed to be doing, but I risked it, for the sake. This was not the only church that I had called. Again, there were multiple churches, all with the same outcome. However, I must say that there was one person that I spoke with. His name is Fikr Gayeli, of Debra Mihrak Mikael. This was also in Washington, D.C. He pointed me in a direction to travel in before he had gone back to Ethiopia. And for that, I thank him. If he ever sees this, thank you. I wrote to Fikr Gayeli and asked him, um, why does the EOTC never respond to my letters? I asked, are they not the true church, practicing the true faith? I also asked if they were trying to push me away from the faith because I was in prison, or not born in Ethiopia. After asking him these questions, I again spoke with him on the phone, sneaking to use the phone again, and he assured me that this was not the case. I was not being pushed away, and he apologized on behalf of others who may have been pushing me away unknowingly. So after all of this, I found myself questioning a lot of things, like, is Christianity of God? Should I go back and practice Islam or even voodoo? I began asking myself, why am I not being accepted if this is the first church? I also wondered, is this the way that everyone considered to be, so-called African American is treated by the EOTC? So all of these questions started me on another journey to find out from clergy on why exactly was all this happening. Following much study and meditation, I began to speak to different clergy to see why such a dichotomy was there between, the so-called African American and the Ethiopians of the EOTC. I found that though not verbally spoken, there was a certain amount of racism towards so-called African American people from the migrated Ethiopians. This is due in part because they, meaning the migrated Ethiopians, mostly saw the so-called African American through the lens of the colonizer, based upon the propaganda of this government coupled with what they saw. So the migrated Ethiopian saw and sees, the so-called African American people selling the drugs, claiming and banging, prostituting, and a slew of other things. However, they have never considered the full plight of the so-called African American in the Americas. The migrated Ethiopian does not know nor understand fully the systemic racism and oppression of this so-called country. The migrated Ethiopian does not fully understand the history, past and present, of the socio-economic depravity pressed upon the African American people by this American government. For my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Since the country that we call Ethiopia today was never colonized, the migrated Ethiopian does not understand, nor can they begin to understand, nor comprehend the lasting damaging effects that it has upon the spirit and mind of a people who have been. As those of what we call Ethiopia today are a proud people, as they should be, about never being colonized. They, in this puffed upness, cannot identify with the diaspora as being one and the same people. So again, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. What I find very interesting, yet very disturbing, is that for Ethiopia to be the first Christian nation, how does the EOTC and the Ethiopian not understand Isaiah chapter 20, where it speaks about the Egyptian and the Ethiopian being led away captive? How could they not know that all the children of Cush are Ethiopian? How could they not know that until the scramble for Africa by the Europeans, Ethiopia covered from the Horn of Africa to the south part of the African continent over to the west coast of Africa, which was called Lower Ethiopia? For my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Before John Hoy, which just means His Majesty, the country that we call Ethiopia today was known by and to the world as Abyssinia. John Hoy said that he chose to call the country Ethiopia. Some even say rename it Ethiopia and have the world call it that is because this is and was the oldest known word to classify all of us as one people, showing that he himself understood just who the enslaved people were. We were his people. We were and are Ethiopian. This he further proved by donating land, Shashamani, to the use, to us, of the West. As he said that he's the head of all descendants of Africa. Now, the modern Ethiopian did not like this, as they had no idea why he would do such a thing. Why would he give land to these people that were not of him? But only if they knew. For my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. I find that there is much disconnect dealing with the EOTC and the so-called African American, because the modern Ethiopian does not understand and even takes for granted what they know. It's like the church, in a sense, does not believe it needs to evangelize anymore. The EOTC fails to recognize that the only reason that is in the Western Hemisphere was to specifically convert or proselyte so-called black people, the people of the diaspora. That is the only reason why the EOTC is in the Western Hemisphere. That's the only reason why it was sent to the Western Hemisphere. This was sanctioned by John Hoy, and then at that point, the Patriarch Basilios. It is and was not sent here to be a cultural center for the modern Ethiopian, though culture is very, very important. Even though one can proudly say that Ethiopia is the first Christian nation, making it the ancient church of yesterday, today we must ask, is the EOTC this in name only? We must ask, where is the Christian action of the EOTC for the diaspora today? Or, as some would say, the diaspora. Excuse me. Since the depose of John Hoy regarding the Western Hemisphere, the EOTC has forgotten its mission. And because of this, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. There's a priest whom I spoke with, and I posed to him the question, why does the EOTC disregard the so-called African American? And I quote that his response was, Ethiopians take religion and religious life seriously. Ethiopians think about the next life. Other communities do not take religious life and religion seriously. Ethiopian fathers are strong on faith. They look for things pertaining to the faith. They feel like the people that come to the EOTC are called by God. So, they do not go out to convert like the Roman Catholics and Islam does, as they are not worried about numbers per se. So, for this, now don't get me wrong, I can agree on the point of how many communities do not take religion and religious life seriously. However, to say in layman's terms that going to the people is not important is, to me, is like a slap to God's face. For God did not wait for the people to come to him. God went and revealed himself to the people. even though the church um, is trying to be more modern, the church leaders can't forget the roots of the faith. Even though the eunuch in the book of Acts, chapter 8, verses 26 through 40, took the gospel message back to Ethiopia, Abba Salama, as well as the 9 saints, went to Ethiopia and still did the will of God, which was to help um, bring better understanding and unity among the faith and the people of the faith. To say we will wait for the people to come to us disregards the word of Christ, where he says, go and make disciples of all nations. Or, even as Christ stated, to visit the sick, the widow, and the prisoner, just as the apostles did, as the word apostle means one who is sent, not one who waits for people to come to them. We must bring heaven on earth, just as is stated in the Our Father. Once the church begins to disregard the people of their mission, that old saying of being so heavenly bound that you are no earthly good seems to hold true. Again, only after the time of John Hoy regarding the Western Hemisphere and the so-called African American people has the EOTC forgotten its mission, for my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. In conclusion, the church must realize that, like Ezekiel the Watcher, the blood of the people will be on their hands if they fail in doing what they were sent to do. They must realize the fallen spiritual nature of the so-called African American, the so-called African American people, and hear the cry for help, and not only hear the cry, but then open that chest of ancient treasures to help. To the so-called African American, I quote Father Paisius Austru's book, which I will show you what book it is. Excuse me. It is called Wade in the River, the story of the African Christian faith. Sent to me by my big brother, Father Jabril Ballantine. That is the direction that I was pointed in from Fika de Gayeli, who Father Jabril, my big brother, has assisted so much in helping me to come to the true faith. I have to give a shout out to him. I apologize, as he came all the way from Florida to Virginia to the prison to visit me, to make sure that I'm studying and staying on that straight path. So I thank you, big brother. But what I want to quote from you is from page 198. It says, "The time has come. We have tasted the fruits of divided European religion. Now is the time to come home. Home to the ancient Orthodox faith, the faith of Africa, the faith of the early martyrs, the faith passed on from Christ and his apostles to you and me. Let us worship Christ. Let us embrace his mother, the apostles and the martyrs. Let us embrace each other around the life-giving fountain of baptism and the healing table of the body and blood of Christ. This is the ark, the old ship of Zion, that is waiting for us to get on board." Now that we can see a glimpse of things from both sides, let us no longer be destroyed for lack of knowledge. For the proverb goes, "Dir biabir in besa yasir," which means spider webs joined together can catch a lion, meaning together we can do anything. So, again, let us study more. Understand where Christianity came from. Understand who it is of. Know where the first Christian nation is. Understand that what they're trying to call the Middle East today was not being called that until World War II. That was always known as Northeast Africa. Understand who you are. To the EOTC, understand who the so-called African American people are and do your job and part as well. For those who don't understand certain things, reading that book that you just saw, Wade in the River, the story of the African Christian faith, the book, The Real Facts About Ethiopia by J.A. Rogers is a great book to read also, to give you historical facts. There are many other books that I could name. If you need any suggestions, please drop a comment and I'll be glad to assist in that. Until the next time, may you all be blessed. Study to show ourselves approved as we are one people. Let us be Tawahiro. Amen.